올갱이하고 이 된장이 어우러져야지 국맛이 제대로 나지. 생시간 9하고 부추하고 8대 2 정도 들어가요.
제가요 이거 엄청 좋아하거든요. 눈에도 좋고요, 간에도 좋고, 숙취 해소에도 좋고, 그래서 많이 먹고 있어요.
이렇게 씹을수록 쫄깃하고 맛있어요.
빵구나. 닭닭 그런 거 닭닭.
시원한 올린 입덧이로 오세요.
How to survive in Korea. Weddings. Step 0. Attire. As a guest, dress formal to business casual. Avoid wearing all white, shorts or going topless. Step 1. Arrival time. Arrive 30 minutes prior to the wedding ceremony. Too many cars, too many halls, too many people. There are many twists and turns. Take pictures and shake hands. And write your name vertically, not horizontally, in the guest book. Step 2. Or, shibor. 50,000 won, 100,000 won, 150,000 won. Cash gifts are given in these units. Decide on the amount based on your relationship. Write your name vertically on the envelope. Step 3. Wedding etiquette. Fill up the front row. Guests have 3 duties to fulfill: clapping, cheering, and taking pictures. Step 4. Dining. Take off your jacket. This will be your seat from now on. Start with the not your everyday delicacies. Kobe-jjim. Yes. Bosa. Yes. Chili shrimps. Definitely yes. Kimbap. Yeah. Only if you can't live without it. No need to pile up food. You have more than one opportunity. Did you survive the wedding? Wait, did someone catch your eye? What are you waiting for? You're looking fine today.
In our headlines on this Tuesday, March 11th, here in South Korea. U.S. President Donald Trump does not reject the reality that his tariffs may result in a recession, and the stance sparks a fierce sell-off on Wall Street that sees the U.S. stock market losing substantial ground on Monday. Meanwhile, here in South Korea, acting President Cho Sang-mok presides over the 10th session of the Population Emergency Response Meeting aimed at boosting the birth rate and bolstering the support framework for an aging society. And the Constitutional Court has yet to disclose a date for its ruling on the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. And while many had initially believed a verdict would be delivered this coming Friday, some are now speculating the court's ruling may take place next week. Wall Street tumbled on Monday as investors responded sharply to concerns about a possible recession following remarks by U.S. President Donald Trump to Fox News on Sunday. Our correspondent Moon Hae-ryun reports.
Wall Street saw an ocean of red as investors began selling their shares as soon as financial markets opened Monday amid heightened fears of a U.S. recession. The benchmark S&P 500 shed 2.7%, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq showed its biggest drop in more than 2 years as it slumped by 4%. Big tech stocks, including Apple and Microsoft, both members of the so-called Magnificent Seven, were at the center of the selling. Tesla plummeted by more than 15%, while chip giant Nvidia fell by more than 5%. Outside of stocks, Bitcoin also slipped below the $80,000 mark, returning to levels before Trump's inauguration. Comments made by U.S. President Donald Trump in an interview with Fox News on Sunday, when asked about whether he expects a recession this year, stoked market concerns.
There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. That's a big thing. And there are always periods of, it takes a little time.
Experts say that the risk of recession is something that Washington is viewing as a necessary evil for the greater good, and they say that this is reflected in Trump's blasé response to recession fears.
These are things that they're willing to accept for that longer term, more stable, more self-reliant, stronger position for the U.S.
And this was supported by the White House on Monday, as its economic advisor Kevin Hassett pushed back on talks of a recession while calling a potential contraction a very temporary phenomenon. He backed Trump's tariffs on Canada, Mexico and China, claiming that the measures would bring jobs and manufacturing back to the U.S. This comes amid heightened uncertainty around the Trump administration's on-again, off-again tariff policies, with levies on Mexico and Canada pushed back yet again to April 2nd for goods under the free trade agreement between the U.S. and the two neighboring countries. With the U.S. set to impose another wave of tariffs on steel and aluminium starting Wednesday, eyes are on how markets will respond. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
And against that backdrop, Goldman Sachs has slashed its economic growth forecast for the U.S. to 1.7% this year from an earlier outlook of 2.4%. The downward revision has been linked to rampant concerns that the Trump administration's tariff campaign would weaken the U.S. economy. Now, just last quarter, the American economy grew 2.3%, tangibly slower than the 3.1% growth posted in the third quarter of 2024. In other news, Ukraine says North Korean soldiers have been actively engaged in counter-offensive operations alongside their Russian counterparts in the Kursk region. Our Lee Sing-jae has more.
Ukraine's top military commander Alexander Syrsky said Monday that North Korean soldiers have taken part in Russian military counteroffensives to recapture territory in Kursk lost to Ukrainian forces. According to Reuters and AFP, General Syrsky said on social media that a significant number of Russian troops supported by North Korean soldiers went on the offensive but suffered significant losses in troops and equipment. The comments come amid reports that the Russian military has been successful in its counteroffensive against Ukraine in the Kursk region after the U.S. cut off military support for Kyiv. The Russian military also claimed that it had recaptured a number of villages in the Kursk region. Meanwhile, high-level meetings will be held in Saudi Arabia between officials from the United States and Ukraine this week. Ukrainian diplomatic and military leaders will hold talks with U.S. officials on Tuesday. This includes U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who expressed confidence that the talks with Kyiv will lead to a positive outcome, but insists Ukraine needs to make concessions. Rubio also stressed that while Russia cannot conquer all of Ukraine, it'll be very difficult for Ukraine in any reasonable time period to get back territory lost to Moscow since 2014. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is set to visit Moscow for a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to sources familiar with the matter, the visit comes as the administration looks to secure a ceasefire. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And North Korea has resumed its tough rhetoric against South Korea's annual military training with the U.S., while making no mention of its launch of multiple missiles into the West Sea Monday afternoon. Our defense correspondent Bae Eun-ji has more.
North Korea on Monday fired what are presumed to have been multiple close-range ballistic missiles from an inland area called Hwangju County toward waters off its west coast. But the regime's state media has remained silent about the launch, even the day after. North Korea typically acknowledges its ballistic missile launches the following morning through state media, often framing them as test firings. However, this time, it has made no mention of the launch. Instead, the Korean Central News Agency criticized the ongoing South Korea-U.S. combined military exercise, which kicked off on Monday, labeling it a confrontational war rehearsal. It also denounced the annual drills as a dangerous provocative act. Experts say that the regime's intention may be to show, on one hand, its muscularity, while on the other hand taking a slightly quieter tone about the missiles themselves.
The fact that North Korea launched ballistic missiles in line with the start of South Korea and the United States military exercise shows that the regime was not lying when it previously warned it would retaliate against these drills. Nevertheless, responding to a large-scale combined military exercise with close-range missiles suggests an intention for a certain level of restraint.
Because the North's latest launch was the first of its kind since the start of Trump's second presidency, pundits also believe this may suggest that the regime is open to talks with the United States.
By going ahead and launching, they show strength from their perspective. In refraining from too much mention, they provide some wiggle room should the Trump administration approach them and try to open doors in terms of talks.
Following the North's launch, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command issued a statement calling on Pyongyang to refrain from further unlawful and destabilizing acts. It reaffirmed that Washington's commitments to the defense of South Korea and Japan remain strong. The European Union also denounced the launch, saying that it threatens regional security, heightens tensions, and violates UN Security Council resolutions. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
And South Korea has tentatively agreed to establish diplomatic relations with Syria, which is the only UN member state that Seoul has yet to forge ties with. Now, this is according to the Foreign Ministry here on this Tuesday, adding that related protocols are underway. Early last month, ministry officials were in Syria and met with authorities there to discuss prospects of official ties. Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Shara took power after bringing an end to Bashar al-Assad and his family's half-century-long dictatorship last December. The 10th discussion on Korea's demographic concerns took place earlier this afternoon, presided over by Acting President Choi Sang-mok. Our Lee Soo-jin covers this latest talks on boosting Korea's birth rate and bolstering the support framework for an aging society.
South Korea is moving to ramp up investment in the age tech sector and benefits for families with children to tackle the nation's demographic challenges. These plans were announced following the 10th session of the Population Emergency Response meeting held on Tuesday, led by Acting President Choi Sang-mok.
The recovery of delayed marriages and childbirth due to COVID-19 is largely due to the urgent efforts of various sectors. The government will focus on maintaining the momentum of the rebounding birth rate and strengthening its response to low birth rates.
The nation's total fertility rate, the average number of children a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, rose for the first time in 9 years to 0.75 last year, after it fell to its lowest annual figure of 0.72 in 2023. But the country continues to age, as in December last year, South Korea became a super-age society, with people aged 65 or older making up more than 20% of the total population. The age tech market, where advanced technology is integrated into products designed for the elderly, as a result, is expected to grow significantly. To support this growth, the government plans to launch a 300 billion Korean won, or around $206 million project focused on developing 5 key age tech areas: care robots, wearable and digital medical devices, treatments for age-related diseases, anti-aging and regenerative medicine, and smart home care. And it will also establish more than 2,000 smart senior care centers, in addition to the more than 2,300 already in operation, where the elderly can utilize age tech devices. The government is also moving to increase benefits for families with children. For newlywed couples and families with children, the income limit to qualify for public rental housing will be raised from 100% to 130% of the average monthly income for single-income households, and from 120% to 200% for dual-income households, enabling more families to benefit. Multi-child families will also have access to priority screening services not only at Incheon Airport but also at Jeju, Gimhae, and Gimpo airports. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The Constitutional Court has yet to disclose a date for its ruling on the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol, and while many had initially believed a verdict would be delivered this coming Friday, some are now speculating that the court's ruling may take place next week. Our political correspondent Shin Ha-young tells us why.
It's been 2 weeks since the final hearing in President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment trial, but the Constitutional Court has not yet announced a date for its ruling. Given that previous presidential impeachment rulings were made about 2 weeks after the final hearing, many expected the ruling to be this Friday. However, since the court decided to deliver impeachment verdicts on the chief state auditor and 3 top prosecutors on Thursday, expectations are rising that the ruling on Yoon could be delayed until next week. There is no precedent for the courts delivering major rulings on consecutive days. Ahead of Yoon's verdict, police are considering banning the release of stored firearms to prevent potential attacks. The National Police Agency said it's refusing to release firearms stored at police stations used to kill dangerous wild animals. Under the current law, licensed gun owners must store their firearms at police stations and only take them out to hunt down wild boars or birds. On the day of the ruling, police will designate parts of Seoul's Jongno-gu and Jung-gu districts near the Constitutional Court as special crime prevention zones to maintain safety and manage crowds. Vehicle barriers will be set up within 100 meters of the court. During a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Acting President Choi Sang-mok expressed concern about possible national division and conflict over the presidential impeachment ruling.
The government will respond firmly according to the law, with zero tolerance for any illegal or violent protests, as well as any acts that challenge public authority.
Meanwhile, the main opposition Democratic Party began its sit-in protest at Gwanghwamun Square on Tuesday, calling for Yoon's removal, while the ruling People Power Party decided not to stage any demonstrations to pressure the court. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
And as mentioned in that report, the political fates of the chairman of the Board of Audit and Inspection, Choi Jae-hye, and the chief of the Seoul Central District Prosecutor's Office, Lee Chang-soo, as well as 2 other prosecutors, will be announced by the Constitutional Court this coming Thursday. The impeachment motions against these 4 public officials were passed unilaterally by the opposition-led parliament early last December. The prosecutors are accused of failing to properly investigate alleged crimes related to First Lady Kim Gun-hee, while the head of the audit agency is accused of mishandling the inspection on the relocation of the top office from Cheongwade to Yongsan. Findings for the first 10 days of March show an uptick in exports driven by cars and ships. According to the Korea Customs Service, exports amounted to $13.9 billion during this period, up 2.9% on year. By region, Korean exports to the U.S. market rose 5.5%, while those to the EU jumped 6.8%. By product, meanwhile, semiconductors saw their share in total exports shrink slightly. Samsung's Galaxy S25 Ultra topped U.S. magazine Consumer Reports' latest review. In the magazine's smartphone evaluation for March, the Galaxy S25 Ultra scored the highest in various categories, including camera, display, and durability. Similarly, the Samsung smartphone was selected as the best by consumer associations in European and Nordic countries, such as the UK, Italy, and Sweden. An unlikely encounter between Korea's traditional court music and artificial intelligence offers audiences the chance to indulge in the lost lyrics of the past. Our Yoon explains.
The royal processional music of the Joseon-era kings as they departed from and returned to their palaces will be performed on stage at the Yeakdang Hall of the National Kugak Center in Seoul. The royal processional music of the Joseon dynasty followed a specific format, starting with 출궁악 for when the king leaves the palace, then 행악 for during the procession, 환궁악 is played upon his return, and finally 연례악 banquet music is performed after his arrival at the palace.
Under the title Hengak and Bohoja, Steps of Heaven and Earth, it's less a restoration and more a three-dimensional production of the royal family's elegant yet brilliant processional court music.
Bohoja, a repertoire of Korean court music, sings of a peaceful reign. But the last of its 3 parts only survived as an instrumental piece. In this production, AI was used to generate new verses. AI models were trained on 350 of Crown Prince Hyomeong's works, one of the most prolific Hanshi poets of the Joseon era. They were cross-referenced with over 100 poems by scholars Chung Yak-yong and Kim Jung-hee for the newly composed lyrics.
The old books of poems written with brushes were digitized. After all the Chinese characters were processed, old Korean translation samples were also collected and input.
Bohoja is performed in Korean traditional opera, telling the story of King Sejo, the 7th monarch of the Joseon dynasty, and Prince Anpyeong, who was sacrificed as a victim of King Sejo's lust for power.
27 years after the Gyu Jongnan coup, where did Mushim, the daughter of Anpyeong, go? Perhaps pacing around her father's traces.
The fundamental rhythm and scales are based on traditional music, but the complicated sounds in between have been removed to bring a so-called ballad-style pansori expected to be more widely received by the audience.
We follow the more simple flow of the traditional sounds, but the complicated sounds in between, that even I can't relate to, have been taken out.
Led by young director Kim Jung, who has been garnering attention in the theater industry, experienced singers will be staging The Life of Remorse at the National Kugak Center in Seoul on March 13th and 14th. 이은진, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you the latest stories from around the globe. Off the east coast of England, an oil tanker and a cargo ship have collided, leading to fires and environmental concerns due to leaking fuel. On Monday, the U.S. flagged oil tanker Stena Immaculate and the Portuguese flagged cargo vessel Solong collided in the North Sea near the Humber estuary. The Stena Immaculate, anchored at the time and carrying jet fuel for the U.S. military, suffered ruptured cargo tanks after the collision, resulting in explosions and a subsequent fire. The Solong, reportedly transporting sodium cyanide, also caught fire. Emergency response teams rescued 36 individuals from both vessels. One person was taken to the hospital and one person is reportedly missing. Experts are currently assessing the environmental impact of the collision, noting that while the leaking jet fuel evaporates more quickly than crude oil, the potential release of sodium cyanide presents additional risks. Greenland is set to hold its parliamentary election on Tuesday local time, attracting significant international attention due to recent comments by U.S. President Donald Trump regarding his interest in acquiring the world's largest island. Greenland's electorate will vote to fill all 31 seats in the parliament on Tuesday. Approximately 40,500 of Greenland's 57,000 residents are eligible to vote, and some Greenlanders cast early ballots on Monday. The election's central issue is whether it should pursue independence from Denmark, as the island remains a self-governing territory of the country. Recent statements by U.S. President Donald Trump proposing that Greenland could join the United States have intensified this debate. The election's outcome is unpredictable, with Greenlanders emphasizing their right to self-determination amid external pressures. In Guatemala, the country's volcano of fire, located 53 kilometers from the capital, Guatemala City, erupted on Sunday night local time, prompting authorities to evacuate almost 300 families and caution that an additional 30,000 residents could be at risk. The 3,763-meter volcano, among Central America's most active, expelled gas and ash high into the atmosphere, leading to the closure of nearby schools and a major roadway connecting local communities. Emergency services are on high alert and are closely monitoring the situation. An eruption in 2018 killed over 190 people and left approximately 230 missing. In India's northern city of Varanasi, a major Hindu pilgrimage town, people celebrated Holi, the festival of colors that signifies the arrival of spring and the triumph of good over evil. The devotees, drenched in colored powder, enjoyed cultural performances as they immersed themselves in the festival spirit at a temple for Hindus. Festivities of Holi reached their peak on March 13th and 14th. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Warm weather that feels like late March to early April continued during the day today. However, in this whole metropolitan area, the first high concentration fine dust emergency reduction measures of this spring are implemented until tonight. In addition, ultrafine dust warnings were issued in southwestern Gyeonggi-do province, including Incheon and Suwon. The stuffy air is expected to continue until Thursday, especially in the central parts of the country, including Seoul. In addition to the stagnant atmosphere, there will be additional smoke from overseas tomorrow night. There is a possibility that yellow dust will gradually be added to the dusty air. Tomorrow morning will start mild all over the country, with Seoul at 6 degrees Celsius and Gwangju at 7 degrees. Highs will move up to 13 degrees in Seoul and Chuncheon, 18 degrees in Gyeongju. In the second half of the week, it will be as warm as mid-April, with Seoul rising up to 17 degrees. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up now is our daily panel session. Do stay with us.
How to survive in Korea. One room. So, you're surviving in Korea if you've signed a contract for a one room. Obviously, you're a pro. But the real deal begins now. Step 1. Housewarming. No need to buy toilet paper, diffusers or hand soap. You'll get them soon enough as housewarming gifts. And some are bound to pile up. There's nothing better to serve your guests than milpaeyu nabe. If you have Korean friends coming over, don't forget the extra garlic. Step 2. Garbage disposal. With great power comes great responsibility. You've had a good time, so let's get to work. It might be tempting to sweep everything into a trash can, but you have to separate your garbage. Not bothered? Beware that negligence is punished with a fine or public humiliation. Step 3. Drying rack. You're excited to live alone in Korea, but the fate of these items, hanger, storage, or a hanger. Go get fresh coffee outside. Jogging doesn't cost anything, and nothing beats instant rice. But keep one item around so that you don't get too lonely. Step 4. Pros of living alone. No mum. Cons of living alone. No mum. A new towel doesn't magically appear. You have to do the laundry regularly. If anyone gives a towel as a souvenir, take it. Get rid of mold immediately. Don't be lazy with the vacuum cleaner. Housework is an endless affair. Overwhelmed? Give your mum a call and thank her for everything she's done. Did you survive in your one room? Wait, you have an unwanted visitor. Call someone you fancy. Could be the right person for the job.
The academic pressure for excellence now has some Korean preschoolers competing for a seat at elite academic institutions well before starting school, as tiger moms hope to offer their toddlers a head start over the competition. We cover this reality and more on Press Perspective today. Hello, you're watching Press Perspective for this Tuesday, March 11th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. The passion for education here in South Korea has been frequently covered by both the local and foreign media, but interest has been renewed in recent times as academic pressure now seems to target preschoolers. For more on this phenomenon, I have Stephen Borwick, a staff writer for Japanese weekly news magazine Nikkei Asia, here in the studio. Stephen, it's great to have you back.
Happy to be here.
I also have writer Colin Marshall with the Pundit's take on today's topic. Colin, welcome back.
Thanks for having us on here.
Right, Stephen, a growing number of children here in South Korea are being sent to private academic institutions well before starting school. Now, some say it's fundamental, others say it's foolish. What are your observations?
Let me answer that starting with an anecdote. I am the father of a 5-year-old girl, and not long ago I was in a social setting and a Korean mom said to me, "What are you doing for your daughter's academic English?" And I said, "Well, nothing. She's 5 years old. I speak English with her at home all the time, and she's picked up the language very well. I read to her before bed every night, but I am not drilling her in the technical aspects of grammar or anything like that." And this woman's response was, "Oh, well, maybe she speaks English fine, but studying is a whole different matter. You need to start getting her private instruction." And I thought that that was a bit excessive. She's still only 5, and I think children her age are better off just kind of having time to play and be kids. And I don't know enough about what the academic literature says on the returns and the benefits of this kind of very early childhood education. I'm generally of the belief that children of that age, the kind of education that they need is in learning to get along with their peers and learning, having kind of tactile and physical experiences. They should be outside playing a lot and getting exercise and just learning basics. And I think that it's too early to really be inculcating in these children a sense of academic rigor. But I could be wrong, and I think that I would just close my answer by saying when I say that, what I'm motivated by is a kind of tension that I think all parents face, which is wanting to give their child freedom, wanting their kids to be happy, wanting their kids to enjoy an actual childhood and have all of the freedom and the peace that ought to come with that, but also not wanting their kids to be left behind, also not wanting their kids to have inadequate skills when it comes time to compete with their peers. I think a lot of what drives this very intense competition and this insistence on earlier and earlier education is a fear that everybody else is doing this, so if my child is the one that is not doing this, then will they be at a disadvantage? I don't know, but I think every family needs to strike what they feel is the appropriate balance in how rigorous to be and how kind of laid back to be.
Right. Well, this fear has given birth to the so-called tiger moms, as we know, Colin, and tiger moms, they're becoming more fun themes of drama as well as entertainment content in recent times here in the country, of course. How do you explain this growing interest?
Yes, they've returned to the discourse here in Korea, haven't they? And not necessarily in a manner praising them. But Tiger Mom is the word you might recognize in the West, in the U.S. There was that big book, Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother by Amy Chua, Harvard professor, 15 years ago or so. Here, we would say Dechi Mom, as in mom, the English mom, but Dechi referring to Daechi-do, a part of Gangnam, where there are many hagwon, or after-school private academies, concentrated. Just a few months ago, I was meeting an American journalist who was here, a reporter doing a piece on population decline, and so we naturally came to Korea. And the first thing he asked me was, take me to that neighborhood where there are all the hagwon. He didn't say Daechidong, but I knew that's where he meant. So we walked around there for a while, took in the sights, and he later included a lot of it in the piece. You know, in astonishment, these little kids, these tiny kids, they're going into and out of the buses, and they have these. I love it. He pointed out the fake heraldry, like as if it were some sort of English aristocratic crest that all these hagwon use. So he got a lot out of that. But the Daechimom character, I think one point of inflection was a few months ago as well, that the sort of popular culture, the Korean popular culture took a turn on this, or sort of brought the Daechimom to prominence, was on Park Myung-soo's radio show, the comedian Park Myung-soo. He has a segment where he reads out listener comments, and if they have funny stories, they tell one, and they send it to him, he reads it out, and he makes a whole thing out of it. You know, he uses his gag man skills. And this one that sticks in my mind was a listener on the playground. She took her kids to the playground and witnessed this scene. Some little boys were getting into a standard playground scuffle. It was kind of a stare down. And the parents on the sidelines were shouting advice to them about how to handle this. And one mom says, David, 답답하면 영어로 해. You know, David, first of all, she called him David, not a Korean name. Second, if you're frustrated, if you can't find the words, just speak English. Let me emphasize, everyone in this story is Korean. The kids are Korean, the parents are Korean, not a non-Korean involved in this. But 답답하면 영어로 해, as in transmitting the message like to other parents. This isn't for him. This is not for the boy. This is for other parents to hear, oh, my child knows English better than Korean. And in very few countries, I would say, would not being capable in your native language be a flex, but sadly, in Korea, that's the situation we're in. And more recently, there have been sketches on comedy shows featuring Daechimom-type characters, and very viral recently was a video series by the comedian Lee Soo-ji. She's doing a character who is the Daechimom, complete with the designer puffy jacket and the designer bag, scarfing gimbap in her car while waiting for her 5-year-old son, whom she calls Jamie, to get done with out of his hagwon, and rejoicing over every sort of not that impressive developmental milestone he makes. She nails every detail, and that's why it went viral. Everyone knows this character. They've seen this person in real life. Maybe they're friends with this person. Maybe they are the Daechimom, and they can still sort of look at it and see. I think people are seeing this is weird, right? These parents who are spending all their money, almost literally sending their kids to hagwon all the time from a very early age, and insisting on speaking what English they have to their own children as a means of getting ahead. Like something went wrong along the way. People are starting to realize that more clearly. Maybe it's a harbinger of institutional change, more likely maybe not, but it's become a focus of some, I think, to my mind, hilarious comedy.
Right. Stephen, the foreign media, though, it's often covered the more callous consequences of Korea's high academic pursuits. Before we proceed any further, do walk us through some of the concerns touched by the international media.
I would start by saying that the kind of inception point for a lot of these concerns is if you have a big country where there is a very strong consensus as to what constitutes a desirable or an honorable life, and you have the entire society competing towards this very narrow range of goals. You know, when you have something like, I think it's 80 or 85% of South Koreans attend university, and they are all trying to get into one of a few very elite schools, which confer strong job prospects and life prospects more generally if you can graduate from there. And just what kind of negative side effects this extreme competition engenders. I guess just the most basic answer that I would give to that is it results in a lot of young people living under really intense pressure and just not really getting much enjoyment out of life. It's a very, young South Koreans, if you look at data, they tend to sleep far less than young people in other countries. They tend to enjoy less time socializing than children in other countries. They tend to enjoy less extracurricular activities than kids in other countries. And so this is just a very kind of brutal lifestyle that comes with this. It means getting up really early and going to school and then just having a kind of a snack on the bus or a kimbap in your Daechimom's car, and then spending your evening at a succession of private educational institutes, and then having your homework to do, and then going home and just sleeping for an inadequate amount of time and getting up the next day and doing it all again, and doing this 6 or perhaps even 7 days a week. This is not what I think is anyone's idea of a fruitful or an enjoyable youth. And it just leads to all kinds of the dubious distinctions about South Korea. South Korea loves telling everybody that it is the one country that has gone from being a recipient of foreign aid to being a donor. And it has one of the highest per capita gross domestic products in the world, but it also ranks very high on measures like suicide and measures like depression. And the extreme competition and the simple fact that in many ways something like a spot at a university or a job at a prestigious company is a zero-sum thing. Not everybody can get these things, and you're inevitably going to get people who do not win this very brutal competition. And what happens to them? And the people who do, I mean, I think all of us on this panel, we've met people who have won this competition and who have graduated from these elite schools and who get these jobs at these elite companies. And in some cases, they still find it hard to get much satisfaction out of life, because once you get to the top, you've got to stay there. No one wants to suffer the indignity of rising to the top of their society and then dipping out of that. In South Korea, there is the romantic notion of the couple who quits their chaebol jobs and goes and opens a coffee shop on Jeju Island, but that's still a very small number of people who are going to do that. And I would just conclude by saying, as long as this society is going to have such a narrow conception of what constitutes success, it is going to have this very intense competition and these very unfortunate side effects. What I hope, as I observe this, what I always hope is that there can be a possible broadening of what is commonly perceived of as an honorable or a good life. Maybe there are people who can find joy and who can find satisfaction in working with their hands, or working in the hospitality sector, or putting aside financial desires and pursuing a meaningful life through the arts or through activism or through any number of other things. But I'm not going to be the one to tell any ambitious family that they ought not to invest in their child's education, and they should consider something else to be a successful life. That's for every family to decide. And while I would like to be optimistic, I'm not sure we're going to see a significant amount of change in this anytime soon.
All right, well, staying with that, for the time being, according to Statistics Korea, Korea's participation in private academic initiatives, these are initiatives outside the school arena, of course, it stood at over 78% in 2023. Now, according to Statistics Korea, this level is almost 2 times higher than that of its global counterparts. What do you suppose, Colin, is the reason behind this reality? Do you suppose, as Stephen says, it's that desire to be to make sure that your child is on par with the rest of his or her counterparts?
Well, it's apt that you said the reason, because I think there is one. It's the sunung. It's the admissions, the college admissions test, which happens every November. And everybody stresses out about it for years, who's going to take it. And then if they don't get the score they desire, they wait another year and take it. And it's this whole big thing that anybody who reads news about Korea hears about as the test that determines the life of every Korean. A bit exaggerated, that headline, but it's always the headline. The sunung is the problem. You hear this said whenever somebody tries to put up a citizen's petition to scrap the sunung, which never go through. But let's frame it this way. If you offer one of these daechimam a choice and say, for the same price, your child can be instilled with the wisdom of every great thinker of history, or get guaranteed an admission to Seoul National University. Every single one, without exception, will choose the latter. If their kid learned nothing but got accepted to Seoul, they would choose door number 2. I think we all know that. I think we all know they're engaged in buying status, essentially, because this is true of most countries, but especially harshly here, school is a status filter. I mean, you get filtered out, and if the filter dictates you go to one of the sky schools, Seoul National University, Yonsei, Korea-U.S, there are a few others in that league as well, but you get there, you're high status. If you don't, you're not. So this is the goal of the daechimam, to buy this status directly. And I think I was telling what Stephen said before, this anecdote about the mom who asks him, what are you doing for your daughter's English education? Yeah, sure, she can speak it, but can she pass an English test? That says it all. it's a tacit admission that, as I'm often complaining about, I mean, English, if you can't scrap the sunung, scrap the English part, because students don't learn English. They learn sunung English, which is useless, but it's only there to differentiate scores enough to be able to sort the population. And so that's when that mom says that, she says, yes, she can speak English, but what are you doing to make her successful on the sunung, which is the one thing that matters. So that, I think, is the reason, which is, of course, downstream from the SKY system. So you can scrap the sunung, but you've really got to retool the SKY system as well while you're at it, which is much easier said than done, I admit.
It really is, actually.
And
Stephen.
just before we get to that question, I would just say to anyone who's watching, I encourage you to go online and read some of the sunung English problems, because they're
really hard.
They're really hard, and they are not at all reflective of how anyone communicates in English. Indeed. Like, no one, if anyone who's preparing for a life in which they have to use English, perhaps in a work setting or an educational setting or when they travel or anything, you will never need to know a lot of this vocabulary, and you will never put a sentence together in the way that these sentences are put together.
Right, I'm glad you mentioned that. It's a really tough test, the English part of the sunung. And before we get back to sunung, Stephen, one question to you. The academic pressure for excellence, of course, continues to build, as we've spoken about thus far. But the sad reality is that very few children are enrolling in school itself. And according to statistics for this year, some 180 schools nationwide, so not a single first grade student. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this is very closely related to what we're talking about here, and this is, of course, the low birth rate is a big issue, and there's multiple factors involved. But I think we can say that this is, to some extent, a reflection of the fact that the consensus in this society is that if you have children, they are entering this really brutal competition, and as their parent, it is incumbent on you to invest huge sums of money and untold amounts of time and mental energy and everything into giving them every advantage that you can give them as they try to compete in the society. And I think more and more young people in their 20s or 30s or even 40s are just opting out of this. And they're just saying, like, this is not worth it. I don't want to spend my life as a dechi mom or a dechi dad. That's a life that I think only appeals to perhaps a certain personality. And so more and more people are just not having kids. And then perversely, I think what that might end up meaning is that instead of there being, fewer people competing for these spots, the competition might actually get worse, because it has this really deleterious economic effect. There's fewer jobs, and there's fewer economic opportunities to go around. So more and more families, more and more young people become that much more trained on the objective of academic success. As in South Korea, there is less of a manufacturing base, as there is less of a, agriculture or fisheries. There's just fewer and fewer people who are finding well-remunerated livings in these kinds of alternative paths. More and more people are going to go to university, and more people are going to want to compete for that, sort of white-collar life. And I mean, just on a sensory level, I've been all over this country, and I've seen shuttered elementary schools. And there are fewer things that are more sad and more kind of ominous than seeing a elementary school that has moss growing over it and has locked doors and dusty windows, and knowing that that was once a place of the most precious kind of vibrancy. That was once a place where crowds of giggling children once arrived every morning to learn and to have time with each other, and now it's closed. So
right. It's really sad.
Yes.
And Colin, you spoke about sunung earlier on. Now, the government, for its part, as part of efforts that is to reduce perhaps the expenses involved in sending a child to a hagwon, a private academic institution, to prepare for sunung, the government sought to redirect the academic focus back to schools and away from cram schools by adjusting the sunung test itself, claiming that if you just stay in school and follow the school curriculum, it should prepare you quite well for the sunung without having to resort to cram schools or hagwons. What are your thoughts, generally speaking, with regard to such efforts by the government?
Well, yes, the education minister here has, I believe, spoken of a desire to eradicate hagwon culture, which I'm all on board with, but the hagwon, as I implied earlier, are more the symptom than the disease. I mean, the causes are well upstream of hagwon. And you strike down a hagwon, 10 more rise in its place anyway. So you've got to go back to what's causing the hagwon to emerge. What causes this industry to emerge, and what causes the daechi moms of the world to spend so much money on them. So that's one consideration. But as well, I mean, hagwon are a Korean institution for sure, but this sort of problem, this general category of problem, social problem, is not unique to Korea, and in fact exists in the U.S. as well. I mean, go to Palo Alto in Silicon Valley. It makes daechijong look like child's play. I mean, this is nothing compared to what goes on there. And so there's an American journalist and cultural critic named Freddie DeBoer, and he wrote a book about this thing called The Cult of Smart, arguing against this idea that everything needs to be about sorting by intelligence. And he's writing in America about the American educational situation, but it applies just as well to Korea in many respects, the sense that we just need to sort who's the smartest and get them to elite positions in society, and to his mind, sort of equate human value with intelligence. That's what the problem is, and everything else sort of flows from there. So I think critiques that originate in other countries also apply to Korea, but I wonder, I mean, this is something he talks about in the book, that, you know, what is education really doing? That's the question. We conflate it with learning, but learning is not the main objective. Education is in some ways a jail. It keeps kids in place because they can't be running free in society. It does this sorting we talked about before. It slots you into a place in higher education. But as well, I mean, what it's not doing is really, I mean, you learn things in school, but you don't learn that much. It can't make you more intelligent. I mean, I think we know that. School cannot really make you significantly more intelligent. And so if public schools or hagwon or whatever find a way to improve teaching, everybody benefits from it. The ones who are good at the tests and the ones who are not good at the tests, they all do a little better, and no one wins anything. No one gains absolutely. It's like an arms race. It's like the Cold War. The US has more missiles, so Russia gets more. So the US gets more, so Russia gets more. No one wins. The daechi moms are in an arms race. And so I think people know that, but no one wants to be the one to disarm. And that's the situation they're in. So it's an admirable goal on the education ministry's part, but it's going to have to go a lot deeper than sort of tamping down the hagwon themselves.
Right. Stephen, one final question before we end today, pertaining to the academic arena here in South Korea. A Bloomberg article last year, it claimed that most of the top students here in South Korea were seeking medical degrees rather than any other science subject. What are your thoughts or your takeaways with regard to this observation?
My takeaway is that it's a reflection of these people's understanding of the Korean job market more than anything, and the idea being that jobs in medicine are not going to go away. If you are trained as a doctor and you have some kind of expertise in that area, you will always be able to remain employed. The other kind of top, most desirable STEM jobs in the semiconductor sector or wherever else, these are much more cyclical, and these are much more kind of niche. If you have a certain, if you spend your educational years developing a certain narrow kind of expertise, you might be in great demand for a while, but as that industry evolves and as the technology develops, your expertise may fall out of favor and you may no longer be at the top of the food chain. But if you learn how to do something like address a problem with a left ventricle, people are always going to have problems with their left ventricles, and there will always be a need for that kind of service. I think this Bloomberg article might have been published before the South Korean medical field went through the kind of tremors that it continues to go through now, with some doctors having walked off the job in response to a policy measure by the administration of Yoon Suk-yeol that they disagree with, to educate more doctors and to try to address certain shortages in the medical field by just training an overall larger number of doctors. But I think there's no reason to believe that doctor will cease to be an extremely desirable job for bright young people in this country and everywhere else.
Right. Right, I'm afraid, well, that's all the time we have for this discussion. Stephen, as always, thank you very much for your thoughts, and your daughter is lucky to have a father who's not a techipa yet.
Oh, Sonny, you're going to make me blush on TV. Thank you so much.
And Colin, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have today. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
a poor man.